Welcome to the AR and Hiring webinar. I'm your host, Oz Rashid, founder and CEO of MSH, a tech and talent consultancy. As the world of hiring continues to evolve, the integration of AI is reshaping the landscape in unprecedented ways. To discuss this rapidly evolving subject, we've gathered an impressive group of panelists. Joining us from Emory's University, Goizueta Business School, is Prasanna Parasurama, who is an assistant professor of information systems and operations. Prasanna's research seeks to understand how algorithmic hiring systems influence hiring processes and outcomes with an emphasis on the bias and fairness aspects of hiring. Before his academic career, Prasanna worked in the HR analytics industry. How are you doing today, Prasanna?
Hey, Oz, thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Clay Wilson. Dr. Clay Wilson is currently the Cybersecurity Program Director at California State University, San Marcos, where he's responsible for leading all university departments as they incorporate policies for new AI tools into higher education programs. Prior to academics, Dr. Wilson worked as a researcher in the Congressional Research Service, where he analyzed intelligence reports for NATO and researched cybersecurity issues for oversight by the U.S. Congress. How you doing, Doc?
Doing great. Good to see everybody. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. And last, but certainly not least, from New York, we have Sean Dolce. Sean is the CEO and technical founder of Climate 64, a climate tech job platform that helps find technical talent in renewable energy, green construction, sustainable mobility, and clean tech. Sean is leveraging AI to help inner city populations find work in climate tech. Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So excited for all of you to be here. I'm really excited to dive into this very important topic. I know there's a lot of people that AI is a relatively new phenomenon and we're still kind of figuring out what it is and what it isn't. So we wanted to bring on some of you esteemed panelists to be able to discuss and get some good insights out there into the world. So I appreciate everybody joining us. All right, let's start with a little context. I've been in the talent acquisition business for over 15 years, and companies' needs are always evolving. And one of the biggest impediments I've seen to sustainable growth and productivity is the fact that the hiring process, a lot of times in a lot of companies, can be highly inefficient and effectively broken at some companies. Companies in the US hire a staggering 70.4 million people on an annual basis as part of their organizational structure. Think about all the time and frustration that comes with filling these positions. My company, MSH and Aeon, is addressing the pain point by developing an AI-powered platform that will help employers make better and more efficient hiring decisions. So we all know that AI is already having an impact on our work lives. The question is, what are the best practices for this technology in particular when it comes to hiring and informing our decision makings? So we're going to start here with you, Prasanna. First question is, you've done a ton of research, both in your academic career and your professional career prior, around research in algorithmic hiring systems and how they influence hiring processes and outcomes. With more organizations likely using AI to make hiring decisions, how do you see this technology affecting the biases we bring to the table as employers and hiring managers?
Right. So that's a great question to begin with. So we have to first look at how these algorithms are trained, right? So there are AI systems that are somehow implemented in the existing hiring processes. And one of the ways these AI systems are currently being used is in the initial process of the hiring funnel. So sort of the AI is sort of deciding who to screen, who to bring in for a callback or an interview, so on and so forth. So these sort of algorithms are typically trained on data generated by humans, right? So whether someone got a callback or someone got an interview or someone got hired. So this tends to be sort of the target variable that the AI is trying to learn, like who should be sort of interviewed, right? So since it's trained on data generated by humans, by default, any biases that humans have, the algorithm will sort of like learn from the existing sort of data, right? So the resume screening algorithms are a good example of this. If you have biased data, if you have biased recruiters that only tend to give callbacks to certain demographics, the algorithm will sort of learn this bias, right? Another example is LinkedIn, right? So our LinkedIn recruiter uses click-through rates on who recruiters click on, and it sort of learns the inherent biases that humans have. But it's not all bad news, right? So we have tools to measure biases that algorithms learn, and we have tools to mitigate some of these biases, correct for some of these biases, right? So it's not a question of whether AI algorithms and AI hiring is biased or not, right? They're going to be biased. It's a question of whether they're more or less biased than humans that used to make the decisions of the algorithms before.
Which is unequivocally true. And there are things to be taken into account, like algorithmic bias, that we have to be intentional about, and we have to make sure that is something that we're constantly auditing and checking in on. But I do think that you're right, that the ability for the AI to help our own biases, sometimes conscious or unconscious, can be really effective. Do you think that there's certain fairness constraints that AI cannot address? Do you know what HR departments and hiring managers should be doing to kind of navigate these issues in terms of what can't be addressed by AI?
Yeah, so one of the things I think it's currently sort of still an evolving topic in the academy in academia, but I think also I think it's becoming more and more important also in industry, is that AI doesn't work in isolation, right? So you can correct for these biases within the algorithms, but almost always in the hiring process, it's probably going to be a human that's making the ultimate decision, right? So you can think about a scenario where, you can think about the whole hiring process as AI and humans working in conjunction. So you may have an AI that sort of maybe screens candidates in the first stage of the hiring funnel, like maybe shortlist the n number of candidates from your big applicant pool. But the shortlist essentially gets sent over to the hiring manager or some engineering manager or whoever is making the ultimate hiring decision. So in the first stage, you can sort of de-bias the algorithm, the AI can be de-biased, the AI can be, as fair as you want it to be. But if you sort of look at the algorithm in isolation, you're not taking into account how the recommendations or the results that the AI produces interacts with the human that's going to be making the ultimate hiring decision, right? So again, a good example of this, AI may shortlist candidates, but the shortlist gets sent over to the hiring manager who is making the hiring decision. So even if you have an unbiased, de-biased AI algorithm, you have to take into account how these fairness constraints on the algorithm will interact with the human decisions that come after. So one of the things, I have a paper on this, is essentially looking at, okay, so we can de-bias these algorithms, but we also have to consider how these de-biased algorithm will interact with the human that comes after, right? So we can actually take this into account, sort of see how humans will react to it and sort of preemptively correct for such biases in the algorithm itself. So sort of like looking forward to sort of de-bias.
Yeah, I really love the point. I mean, some of the best examples I've heard about AI is it'll get you, no matter how mature it is, it'll get you 90% of the way there, but that 10% and that human intervention is so critical. And I personally think while people have been trying to automate recruitment and talent acquisition processes, for at least the last decade and certainly going forward, I find this to be something that's a very intimate human experience with many complexities, with many stakeholders, that complete artificial intelligence and automation, in my mind, is just not possible, not at least in the foreseeable future. So I'm glad you bring it up that way. It's really about upping our productivity, upping our ability to make better decisions, making hiring more certain, but certainly not replacing the human element. Dr. Wilson, I want to jump in. I want to ask you a question. So given your background in government and academia, how do you see the power of AI being used effectively in these settings for hiring or even admissions, in addition to maintaining the safety and security of the organizations? Because I think it's a very important topic to consider when implementing AI in your business or in your school.
Excuse me. What I've seen is AI is very predictive. It's a predictive tool. And so based on the requirements of the organization, you can try to predict who will fit into your organization. And you can put in requirements for sensitivity, ability to handle secrets, ability to be reliable, other things that are important. But the AI system by itself, it only follows the abilities that are built into it. The inputs determine the kinds of outputs that you get. And for example, for cybersecurity, privacy is gone. Privacy is canceled by social media, evidence that anyone uses when they visit TikTok or Snapchat or Facebook. Also, some organizations are taking advantage of technology by offering quizzes to candidates, and AI can evaluate very subtle things like responses, voice tone, facial expressions, or if someone wears glasses or a headscarf, AI can make decisions, and the decisions are based on the types of input. So if you have an organization that is very sensitive, has high levels of security and sensitivity, you're working for DoD or some contractor who's involved with national security, all these subtle things can be picked up by artificial intelligence and can work to the disadvantage or the advantage of the people involved.
I love that. The technology is only as good as the inputs it's getting and the person controlling the technology. And so if you're putting in bad outputs, you're going to get bad outputs. And so I think that's a really salient point by you. I know there's a lot of fear out there. I think a lot of the articles I see that get clickbait, and there's a lot of fear mongering in AI and what is AI going to do? And is it going to replace my job? I want to ask you, do you see, at least in the near term future, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, do you see AI replacing jobs in these settings, or do you see it acting more of like an assistant? And if it's the latter, any examples you might have of jobs and how they can be more productive, better assisted through AI?
Well, anytime you introduce new technology, there's an upheaval. Some jobs go away, and I think AI will have the same type of effect. Nobody can be exactly sure where the disruption will occur. But for example, we have self-driving cars. They're not fully self-driving yet, but they will be because they offer lots of advantages. Well, right now we have the gig economy where people are offering rides for a fee. Eventually, self-driving cars will take over entirely. You can already see self-driving trucks on the highway right now. But also new jobs will be created. For example, it's important when you're interacting with an artificial intelligence system, you have to create prompts. The types of prompts and the wording that you use indicate what kind of output you're going to get. If you put in prompts that are not exactly designed the right way, you can get outputs that aren't exactly useful. There's a new job system called prompt engineer. These are people who have studied the requirements to go into an AI system with the right wording to produce the right kind of output. We have an example at the university where it's possible now to put in a syllabus, put that as an input to an AI system, a syllabus for a course. For example, a cybersecurity course in network design. So you indicate all that for the AI system. You tell the AI system what kind of reference material is going to be used in the course, and you explain how many weeks the course is going to go along and what's going to be the topic each week. The AI will produce assignments for you. It just create the assignments, and then you have that to present to the students. So AI is a very useful tool for the academics, for the instructors. And I can foresee where, for example, the university has an advisory council where industry people come in, sit, and talk to the instructors to say, this is what we need for our industry. We want you to educate students so they come out with these skills. I can see an AI system in the future sitting at the table alongside the industry representatives, listening and making recommendations for what should be included for education, and that translates into what will show up on interview questions. Wow. So that's one way of looking at what AI will do.
Yeah, I really love that. I think if we look back in history at times, whenever there's been any type of great innovation, whether it be the advent of the printing press or the manufacturing line or the car or the computer or even the internet, there's always been some level of concern of job displacement. What happens, but the reality is that the jobs change, and a lot of times it'll make us more productive, and it changes the way that we work. And so when people tell me, is AI going to replace my job? AI is probably not going to replace your job, but somebody who learns AI might replace your job. And that's why it's important to be aware of this technology and the power of it. Really, really excellent, Doc. I appreciate those insights. Sean, I want to go to you. I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of people in the climate tech space and a lot of founders in the space, and it's an amazing growing economy that is just so awesome. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you see in particular this industry, clean tech organizations and job seekers who want to be in this industry, leveraging AI to achieve their goals?
That's a very good question. Well, I believe that, first of all, climate tech is a huge industry. So there are several different sub-industries within climate tech. So you could have heat pumps, solar, ag tech, you have battery storage, you have circular economy. There are so many different facets to the industry. But where I see AI actually helping people, job seekers looking for these jobs are, because most of these jobs are actually physical, you can't replace someone that's going to install a heat pump or a solar array on a roof. But what AI can do is, as they're getting their certifications, they're getting some of their credentials, AI can actually offset some of the more mundane kind of tasks that they actually have to do every day just to keep, make sure that their credentials are up to date. So while they're actually focused on building actual physical components, taking actual physical training, a lot of the tasks that are generally done, like doing job searching, making sure that, say for instance, there are literally over 200 plus certifications that you could get in the entire climate space. And sometimes some jobs may require a certain combination of certifications. So for instance, if you are in building automation, you may need your EPA 608 so that you can handle hazardous materials. You may need your OSHA 40 or your OSHA 30. You may also even need something like maybe electrical certification, perhaps for handling EV chargers. But what happens is an employer might look for that particular combination. What an employer could gain in that is that you save a lot of time by trying to look for different skilled trades, people that have their particular credentials, and you can actually match them all automatically. And also, obviously, it saves time for job seekers as well, because that way they don't have to kind of keep applying for a position. They already have all the credentials all lined up in combination. So again, I think it would help people focus more on the physical aspect of things, because the truth is we need boots on the ground to actually do all this infrastructure building. Without that, we can't mitigate our net zero emissions by 2030 or so.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a technology optimist. And so one of the things that you and I talked about earlier that really excites me is how AI can potentially help traditionally disenfranchised populations in the inner city in particular get these jobs that the skills of tomorrow that you need to get today to be able to have those jobs. How can AI help those inner city populations, whether it comes to clean tech or any of these types of new roles and jobs that we're talking about that are going to be here in the future?
Well, I think the first thing is, particularly I grew up in the Bronx, so I know exactly what it is to, try to get skills, get jobs in these particular districts. What AI can do is kind of supplement some of the knowledge that is needed to get into this industry. So, for instance, many people don't know the clean economy exists. In fact, the entire economy is the clean economy. All the jobs are throughout, are all in climate, green construction, you name it. It is the economy right now. And so what it could do is it could actually help people learn what are the type of trades that are available that they can easily get in and have maybe transitional skills. For instance, if you're already a truck driver, that means you already have your CDL. You can actually easily transition into driving an electric vehicle or an electric truck. And so what AI can do is actually showcase what are the actual certifications and credentials that are available that you can combine with your existing skill set. So again, if you're in disadvantaged communities, you can actually leverage whatever skill set you already have by kind of using AI to kind of generate what are the options that are available for me. I already have these basic skill sets. So that's what I think AI can help.
I hope some people in our audience who heard this are using that as a spark or using that as kind of the motivation they needed to kind of move forward from a professional perspective. So I love that, Sean. That's really good stuff. Prasanna, I want to come back to you. So you've been involved with a lot of hiring technology. What do you see the most, and this is obviously an area I'm super passionate about myself, what do you see the platforms that are integrating AI successfully? What is the capability? What are they doing?
Yeah, so it's one of two things, right? So how AI is used in hiring. The first way in which companies are using this, integrating this within their existing hiring processes is the screening space, right? So this is sort of high volume businesses that get a lot of applicants. Used to be that, recruiters would go through each one of these applicants and decide, okay, who should I give a call back to, right? So you can think about like traditional tech companies that literally get like tens of thousands of applicants for one open position. So there are a few players in this space. You can think about like Pymetrics. I think there's also Eightfold, like a few other companies that are sort of in the screening space that decide, all right, here's a list of applicants that apply to this job. Who does the algorithm think is a good fit for this job? So used as sort of like a screening process, right? So that's one. And within this space, there are a few other things that these algorithms try to optimize for. It's not entirely clear what the algorithm should optimize for. Right? You can think about an algorithm that just selects on, okay, this is a person I think is going to perform really well if you hire them, right? It's a little bit hard to predict, right? Just based on this, whatever they submitted, a resume or maybe a video interview, so on and so forth. They also try to predict, okay, this is a person that I think will perform well in the interview if you give them an interview, right? So you can think about it. It seems like they're the same thing, but it is a big difference, right? Like one, you're trying to predict something that's far out in the future. If you hire them, this is how they will perform. The second one is, okay, if you give them an interview, they'll likely pass the interview. Maybe a little bit easier to predict.
Two different things. You're absolutely right.
Right. So one is easier to predict in some ways, right? If I give them an interview where they're likely to pass the interview, easier to predict, but it's also not necessarily something like, it's not the thing that you're trying to predict it. But you're really trying to predict, if I hire this person, how will they perform? But that target becomes, it's a hard prediction problem, right? How will this person perform if I hire them? A few other targets that, I know some companies that are not necessarily trying to predict someone's future job performance, but they're trying to predict their retention rate. Like, so you can think about like high turnover jobs where, these firms really care about, one's retention at the firm, right? So they're trying to predict, okay, if I hire this person, they're likely to stay on this job for like 1+ year, right? Because it's obviously, as you know, it's extremely costly to hire and replace people. So essentially, you can think about this as, in the screening space, you're trying to screen for a certain type of candidates, and that's where sort of algorithms come in. And this is usually used when you have, sort of like a high volume business, you have a lot of applicants to go through. So that's one. The second thing is matching, right? So it's not necessarily people that apply to a job, but matching potential candidates to open job positions, right? So LinkedIn is in the business of matching, right? Like essentially matching the labor market to any open jobs. And a lot of companies are also doing this. So they're essentially building a database of potential applicants, and using that database of applicants, they can see, okay, I have a new position that's open. I'm not going to wait for people to apply to this job. I'm going to use my existing database to automatically match candidates to a job so I can reach out to them. So essentially it's like prospecting, things like that. Well, it turns out that I was actually working with one of these companies, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we increase the efficiency of this matching process? And one of the ways that you increase this efficiency of the matching process is to write better job descriptions, right? Something that's not vague, something that's very specific to the exact job responsibility. And they said something very interesting that I had not thought about, which is that if you make, there are companies that write the job descriptions, in a very vague manner, just to increase the number of applicants that apply, right? Then they can use add on to the existing database, the applications, and they use their own technology to match candidates to jobs. So rather than sort of have this self-selection process on the applicant side, they're essentially saying, okay, our matching technology that we have is better than whatever self-selection that's happening among applicants. So we can do a better job with matching than letting the applicants decide whether they're a good fit for the job or not.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of possibilities. This is an area that I put a lot of thought into. I actually do not love that idea of the vague and ambiguous job description, then using the AI to match, for a couple different reasons. I think that probably leads to horrible candidate experience just in terms of applying and not hearing back when you're not a fit for the role. I think I've read studies in the past that if there's 10 skills on a job description, a man will typically only need 8 out of 10 to apply, or a woman will need 3 out of 10 to apply. So I think it's really important to look at it from a discriminatory perspective, and from making sure that we're being very concentrated on the job description. But I certainly understand why that technology and that capability could be advantageous to companies. I think the thing for me is, it comes back to what Doc said earlier. I think it really comes down to the inputs that lead to the output. So the better that you understand your work environment, the better that you understand your team, the better that you understand your preferences as a hiring manager, and the system and the technology and the AI can learn you, that'll allow for you to lead to more predictive and more certain hiring decisions. And will it ever get to 100%? Probably not, because life happens, things change. The person that you hired in 2020 may have different life circumstances in 2022, and things may not work out. But can we get a lot better than we are right now? Because it goes back to what you said earlier. Maybe somebody's great at interviewing. Maybe somebody is amazing at answering questions or taking a technical test in an interview, but that doesn't mean that they're a great fit for the role. The motivation might not be there. The cultural fit might not be there. There's all different types of things that come into play there. So I think it's a really amazing topic that we could talk for hours on. I want to ask you this, Prasanna, but then I'm going to ask Doc to kind of opine on this too, because of his background in the government. Do you think government, or what do you think government's role in regulating the use of AI in hiring is?
Yeah, so that's a very hot topic right now, right? So obviously, there's we have existing laws and policies when it comes to discrimination in hiring. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 that says that you cannot discriminate in the hiring process against some certain protected attributes like race, gender, national origin, so on and so forth. And the policies are very clear in that you cannot have disparate impact, meaning that the outcomes cannot be too different across these dimensions, demographic dimensions, but you also cannot have disparate treatment, right? So the existing policies sort of fit in. So if firms are using AI in the hiring process, that's not going to insulate them from these existing laws, right? So all of that still applies. But what I think is more interesting is, okay, what sort of new regulations do we need if AI is going to become sort of ubiquitous in the existing, in the labor market, right? So one of the interesting things that I've been talking about, I think a lot of academics are thinking about this, is this idea of algorithmic monoculture, right? So monoculture, it's similar idea to like sort of like an agricultural monoculture. So imagine all firms use the exact same AI, artificial intelligence in their hiring process. So either they all use Pymetrics, or they all use some sort of a derivative of ChatGPT. And what happens is these algorithms are clearly not perfect. They're going to make some errors, right? But because all these firms use the exact same AI, the errors are going to be similar across all firms, right? So let's say that it's biased. It's biased in some way. This AI is biased in some way against certain candidates. And what that means is that candidate will get rejected by all firms that uses AI, right? So individually, firms don't have any incentive to coordinate with other firms to make sure this sort of like correlated errors happen. But as a society, as government cares, right? So even though the individual AI may be better than the existing hiring practices in whatever outcome, because this monoculture happens, because firms all use the exact same AI in the hiring process, these errors become correlated, and there are certain candidates that may not get a job at all because all these firms use the exact same AI, and their errors are correlated. So that's a very interesting topic. I think there's talks within in DC that sort of tries to think about, okay, clearly there's not any incentives for firms to fix this, so government has to step in to make sure something like this doesn't happen. There needs to be some sort of like idiosyncratic variation across firms, and they can think about a scenario that does lead to this AI monoculture world, right? This is very fascinating.
Super fascinating. Like, I never thought of it that way. And I think we try to prohibit that with human biases around diversity of experience, diversity of thought in your interview panel, right? Is there diversity of algorithm? Is there diversity of AI that maybe plays a part in that? Really fascinating stuff. Doc, we're talking about hiring, but I'm interested in your take overall in government's integration, interference, whatever we may call it, in regulating AI. What do you see?
There's always this conflict between industry that wants to advance technology and the need to regulate it and direct it. Industry is driven by profit. Regulators are supposed to keep in mind the good of the people. And sometimes there is a regulation that will slow down innovation. And regulators and innovators are in conflict. That may not ever change, I don't know. But we have a problem. How is it possible for regulators to regulate something they don't understand? And I think people are just beginning to understand what AI does, how it works. Most people don't know how it's built. If you look at Hollywood usually takes these ideas to the extreme to make a good story. And the movies that you are seeing coming out now are pretty misleading about how AI really operates. So let me just add something else here. AI has the opportunity to improve the problem, the conflict with diversity. And that again goes back to the people who are involved in setting up the rules that AI uses for evaluating input. There's two concepts. One is, what does it take to be a successful employee at a company? And what does it take to be a good performer at a company? Now, if you set up your AI system so that you define successful employee as the people that already are in the company doing well, then you may wind up rejecting everyone who is not white, everyone who is not male, if that's what the company has been composed of. So good performance means that you may have to set your AI up to give different consideration to candidates who are outside the box. Outside the box means that some candidates may not value college degrees in the future, the same way college degrees have been valued in the past. So if you have candidates that are applying that have skills but no degree, AI has the chance to give these candidates a second look, and that's a way of improving perhaps the outputs. Now, why is it an improvement? Well, if you get candidates who are outside the box to become part of your organization, you wind up with a diversity of opinions and a diversity of viewpoints. Different viewpoints, different opinions sometimes lead to new ideas. New ideas can lead to new products. This can be a formula for success, and AI can help organizations find their way to this by engineering AI to improve and be more open to diversity. I'll leave it at that. Do you have another question for me about this?
I got tons of questions for you. I got to say a couple things. So one is, I love that you talked about Hollywood and the way that they kind of create this dystopian future with AI. And then I look at Sean's poster back there and I see Blade Runner. So I just find that to be a little ironic and fitting for the conversation. I want to ask Sean real quickly on regulation helping AI and using climate tech jobs, but I'm going to come back to you right after that, Doc. What do you think from a regulation perspective? Is that a good or a bad thing in terms of AI's use for hiring climate tech jobs, Sean?
Absolutely. First of all, Dr. Wilson, you made some great points. And I will add, in addition to a college degree may not necessarily be required, but particularly for climate tech jobs, apprenticeships is a far more better bet as far as getting a job in climate tech, because apprenticeship trains you in a very specific area of a particular trade. So, and on top of that, you know, if you join a union, you're actually getting paid much higher prevailing wages compared to someone else that may have a college degree that gets into something like a project management role or more of a data role. If you get these type of jobs where you're installing solar arrays, it's very attractive. You just need an apprenticeship. As far as regulation from the government, there are two things that a trend I've actually noticed in the past few months with AI, and that is some companies are starting to offset the cost onto consumers. And so what's happening is that people could shy away from actually using AI because you can't afford to use it, particularly for job searching. And this is where the government could help regulate how much it would cost particularly for a not-for-profit or in some of the disadvantaged areas, to open up accessibility and to make sure that there's no segregation as far as costs and access to the system. So I think that's another thing that the government could help shape.
Yeah, I mean, where I stand with this is that I love the idea of regulation and government regulation done properly, right? I think New York just recently passed a law about annual audits around hiring technology and checking the algorithms and making sure that there's no bias. I think that's a wonderful thing. What concerns me, because what Doc said is absolutely true. Most companies are going to be focused on profits and innovating against profits, where the government is supposed to be looking out for the people. I think my problem comes down to when special interest gets involved, and it almost always does. And when I saw a presentation by Bill Gurley the other day, kind of talking about this very issue, and that, well, we want to have government regulation, but we want to have the right cross section of people being involved in this and helping make decisions and making sure it's not pushing up a few companies to hurt the actual growing economy in a lot of ways. And so I think that's something that's really important. So I love the idea of the intervention being there, but it has to be done properly. It has to be the right regulating body. I think there should be a bunch of diversity of thought and experience, private, public sector, to make these types of decisions. And that might be a utopia. But I just think that regulation is important, but it has to be done properly. It has to be executed properly. And I think that goes without saying. Doc, I want to jump in here with you real quick, because you and I were talking. I want to take this in a couple of different ways, because I want to talk about the cybersecurity perspective of people's personal identities. But then I also want to talk about, we're coming up on an election year. We're coming up on when people are concerned about deep fakes and videos and all these different things. And the ability to understand what's real and what's not is getting more blurred on a day-by-day basis. So let's start here. From a cybersecurity perspective, how can employees and employers protect their respective identities when it comes to using AI? Is that something that we know fully yet, or is that going to evolve over time?
Protecting your identity means privacy, and privacy is pretty much gone because everybody leaves a trail of data about themselves wherever they go, whatever they do, grocery shopping, calling your friends, watching TV on your streaming service, listening to music. All of that data is collected, just like dust that comes down from the clouds. And so it's very difficult to even talk about privacy and how to protect privacy. There are regulations that say, well, I can opt out of this and opt out of that. But all around the places where you're trying to say, I'm opting out of data collection and data sales, there's still data about you. Organizations want to use the technology to save money and improve efficiency. So in some cases for hiring, the organization will use a quiz, and they'll just say, use your cell phone and take this quiz, and we'll use that information to try to evaluate you. So they're questions. But while you're answering the questions, the AI is looking at you. It's examining your eye flutter. It's examining your facial expressions. It's examining the pace of your answers. It's looking at whether you're wearing glasses or a headscarf. Now, the regulations and laws say that you cannot protect against protected classes. Well, eyeglasses is not a protected class. Maybe headscarves are protected in some countries, maybe not. But AI is evaluating you in ways that you really can't protect against. Now, when it comes to deep fakes, AI can produce, as it becomes more and more sophisticated, it can produce things that look so realistic, you just cannot tell. If someone is making a speech that sounds contrary to their historic way of talking, AI can make them look entirely authentic and put phony words in their mouths. And right now, cybersecurity has a very difficult problem trying to identify a deep fake. I'm not sure if that question can be answered yet. I even think the military is trying to figure out how can we protect against deep fakes. I don't know if we have a clear answer for that yet. So in the future, some of the experts who are building AI systems have said that we're going to have very big trouble with the truth. In the future, AI is going to make that a difficult topic. And society is going to have to, I don't want to say adapt to it, but somehow recover, because we're going to go through a difficult period. At the back end of this, after we get through that, I think AI has tremendous promise to make the world a better place, to have more leisure time for people to do the things that they want to do. But we're going to have to travel through some difficult land, some rough terrain to get to the point where AI does the things that we really, really want it to do. And privacy is one of the things that is going to suffer. Did I answer your question, or is there anything else?
100%. I mean, I think I have to move off the grid and make sure there's no electricity or Wi-Fi near anywhere I'm at if I want to get away from it. But I don't think that's possible either. So I agree with you. This is an evolving thing. I think right now, I would say it falls on the individual to a degree, right? And when you see in the news and you see these different things that are out there right now, there's a very much, I always say, don't make judgments, collect data points. Trust but verify. I think getting more sources, knowing what the right sources are, who's doing the diligence on the back end before reacting, responding, sharing, making a decision or a judgment based on one thing you saw. I think all as individuals, we have a responsibility at this point to make sure that we're going and we're actually searching out and making sure anything that we're going to have a strong opinion on, we better check that we think that through. And it's only going to get worse. And I do agree with you. I think overall, there's a lot of things to be optimistic about with AI, but there's always downsides, and we have to be able to try to mitigate those as much as possible. And that's why I think the topic of regulation is a really good one. I think the other thing you said is really smart too. If you're using a product and it's free, then you're the product. So at the end of the day, we got to know that going in, right? When we're using social media, when we're using these different things, at the end of the day, you got to know that you're leaving that dust trail that you talked about. And I think it's really, really important to be aware of that and be smart about what you're putting out into the world. Prasanna, I want to come back to you. Do you think there's any particular industries you see having more of a dire need for the implementation of AI solutions to improve fairness in hiring?
So I wouldn't say industries in particular. So sort of platforms that that are in the dire need of implementing, fair solutions to AI hiring. So LinkedIn is it's an example, right? What they do, how they implement their recommendation algorithm on LinkedIn Recruiter, affects people at scale, right? They essentially have a good portion of the labor market where, who recruiters reach out to is essentially dictated by LinkedIn's recommendation algorithm. Right now, we don't have any regulations or anything that sort of look into whether, whatever recommendation algorithm that LinkedIn is using is fair, unbiased, so on and so forth, right? But they are doing, to LinkedIn's credit, they are sort of publishing, sort of self-regulating. They have published a few papers that say, hey, this is how we debias our algorithms. But again, it's not any sort of third parties that look into and audit these algorithms, right? Another one is, these software companies, these vendors that provide these AI hiring services, like Pymetrics is another one. A lot of different companies are using it. Again, there aren't any current regulations that look into these algorithms, but there is some sort of self-regulation. Pymetrics hired a bunch of academics to sort of audit their algorithms. But we can't rely on self-regulation long term, right? So there needs to be sort of policies and laws that need to be put in place to make sure that these sort of platforms, this sort of software that's being used at scale are sort of fair and unbiased to be in line with the existing laws and policies.
Love it. Totally agree. All right, Sean, we're going to close out with you before we go to some questions from the audience. So we talked a little bit about helping inner city population. I think that's incredible. Are there any other really big opportunities, or what do you think are the biggest opportunities for using AI and hiring climate tech workers?
Well, I think some of the best opportunities right now in climate tech are probably in the building automation world, because as our appliances get smarter and our buildings get smarter, there are going to be a lot more requirements as far as knowing some of the more traditional type of pieces of technology to actually be appended to those existing technologies already. So for instance, if you know a bit of Python or something like that, it's great for Internet of Things, doing maintenance. I think AI can actually help help building automation workers actually learn different protocols across how all the infrastructure, every single building automation technology has their own protocols. So there's some of them are open, some of them are proprietary. I think AI would actually help people learn and pick up those protocols much easier in building automation. You also have ag tech, if people are working in food industry, anything agriculture. I think AI would work in that industry as well. Basically, as far as regulations, to figure out if our foods are safe and that type of thing, and to give people extra knowledge and knowledge base as far as how they can actually go about planting, these particular crops or whatever it is. So anyway, agriculture would be good as well. So building automation and culture, I would say are the two areas that AI could actually help.
I love it. Super insightful, Sean. All right, let's address some of these questions that have come up we've received from the audience. So the first one comes from a George Marquez in Fort Lauderdale. What does any of you, and anyone can answer this, what is the best use case scenario from an AI perspective if you were implementing the technology for hiring people today? So Prasanna, we talked about what it could be in the future, but right now, what are some of the best use cases you know of or anybody may know of implementing AI into the hiring process that can be effective today?
So as I mentioned, this the one that's probably being used most widely is matching candidates to jobs, right? So new job pops up, you have a new requisition, you have a pool of candidates, you're automatically matching these candidates to jobs. The second one is screening. You have a bunch of applicants that apply to a job. You don't have the manpower to sift through every single application. Companies are using AI to do that. So even it turns out that it's not even large companies that are doing this. Even smaller companies essentially using ChatGPT, saying, "Hey, this is my job requisition. Here's the resume text. Can you, on this is the rubric. Can you rate this resume on a 10-point scale?" And you can automate a lot of this, right? So it's not essentially chat with ChatGPT and it gives you the top 10 candidates. So these are the two areas that I have seen personally where existing companies are using AI in the existing hiring process.
Yeah, love it. Sean Doc, what about if you're a job seeker? What if, I've seen a lot of things on, use ChatGPT to rewrite your resume, or here are great questions to ask at the end of an interview. What can a job seeker do? How can they leverage AI to help them get the dream job they want or the role that they're interviewing or they're really excited about? Doc, any thoughts there? Sean, go ahead.
I'll say some real quick. I'm actually part of this, organization called the Green Economy Network, which is kind of like headed by another not-for-profit organization called Jobs First New York. And they've been using skyhive.ai, which is kind of like a platform for skills matching. And I think what's fascinating about it is that it also helps with trends. So you can actually know exactly in the climate, particularly in the context of climate, you can actually know exactly what areas need attention and where the jobs are growing at scale. So, if you're looking to get into the heat pump industry, you may know that particularly in this segment is hotter than the other. And that goes across, and that's obviously that would actually work with any, it's agnostic in the sense that it can work with any industry, but I think it would help climate tech in general to know exactly where people should focus on getting their training and where are the best salaries for that trade.
Love that. It's great. Doc, anything?
Well, I would just say that some people are concerned when they apply for a job. They want to not check off the point about race or nationality because they think this may not help them, may actually disadvantage them. When AI is involved, that doesn't really make much difference. Whether you try to conceal things about yourself or not, AI will find ways around that. It's going to become more and more sophisticated. People need to just recognize that AI is going to affect every industry in the future. So one recommendation I have is that as AI becomes more widely used, and at this point, most of it is free, ChatGPT and Bard and Bing, they're free to use. Take advantage of using these AI tools for yourself. When you're looking at a company and you think you might want to apply, use AI to rate that company. Ask, what is the history of this company? What do you think about this company? AI will talk back to you in a conversation. Everything that AI says is not always accurate. You have to be aware and learn what to trust and what not to trust from AI, but use it to your advantage. Learn how it works, and maybe that will help you in your job search in the future.
Fantastic. All right, this next question comes from Jeannie Karshis in Baltimore. She asks, we all know the importance of onboarding when it comes to great hiring. Is there any way that AI is being leveraged when it comes to onboarding that we should know about, we should talk about? Prasanna, anything you can speak to there?
That's a good question. I'm actually not aware of, I'm just not sort of, read into this area of onboarding and how AI is used there. But I could imagine a situation where, things like, a lot of it is just automation, right? So it's not necessarily AI So existing HR, sort of like traditional HR companies, just using automation to increase the efficiency of the onboarding process. But I'm not aware of any AI companies in that space.
I can step in here. I've seen something, and we've talked internally about it. Onboarding, right? So when somebody comes into your company, right? We don't hire, we talk about this all the time. We don't hire perfect people, right? We hire people that we feel like are going to be great fits, but have potential to either grow into roles or grow into bigger roles over time. And so when you have an onboarding program, right? And you're able to leverage AI either through the interview process or through self-assessment when they first start the role to understand what their gaps are. Now you can build a training program, right? That really hones in on the things and the areas that they need to develop and get better in, rather than a typical cookie cutter boilerplate training session that everybody gets when they start at your company. So really using AI to identify the real gaps that are important to this job behaviorally, capability wise, technically, whatever it may be, and then building the training program around that, I think is a more effective use of training. It leads to more engagement and it can lead to more success in the role later on. So I think that's probably an interesting area. Let's get another question in before we wrap up. This is from Nick Moses in Cleveland. Wants to know what keeps the panelists up at night with respect to AI's use in their respective industry and settings. And then maybe we can talk about what they're most excited and optimistic about. So Doc, I want to go to you. Let's go to you first. What keeps you up at night when it comes to AI and what we need to keep in mind and keep in check?
Well, with higher education, the problem is what do students think about getting a college degree for the future? And so we look at enrollment. Is enrollment going up or down? And I studied this a little. Forbes says it's going up, and Fortune magazine says it's going down, college enrollment. In the West Coast, the Western area, it seems to be diminishing. And the West Coast is the area for coding, high tech, and building AI. In the South, in Texas, it appears that enrollment is going up in colleges. I don't know why that is. Needs some more research and study. So what colleges need to do is adapt to AI, change the way education is presented. If you look online, you can see something called the Khan Academy, which is for young people. I'm talking about grade school, junior high, high school. And the Khan Academy is a personalized tutor system that's online. Pick a topic, pick a subject, log in, and the individual tutor will work for you and recognize your strengths and weaknesses and take you through an entire course. At the end of the course, you will know all the things that you need to know to be successful using this new skill. You don't necessarily get that with the current model for education. Everything is one size fits all. So education really has to go through some changes and adapt to the new world. So this is one of the industries that's going to have to change, and it's going to be very disruptive.
Yeah. I don't know if that keeps me up at night, but I think that's a really important thing. I think that's I think it's maybe a good thing in a lot of ways. Making education as accessible as possible, I think, is a great thing. But I also agree with you. It's going to change things and hopefully for the better, but there's definitely downsides there too. Sean, what about you? What's keeping you up at night when it comes to AI and what's coming?
I'll say what's keeping me up at night. One or two things is the displacement of certain industries in climate tech as far as smart panels and again, in the same industry, building automation. For instance, a general maintenance tech worker that manages HVAC systems could easily be displaced by having smart panels replacing them that already adjust temperatures and everything automatically. Obviously, we already do that from our phones and from setting our systems. But if you look at it on a large scale basis, that automatically displaces that type of worker. Also, I think it's a generational problem as well. You have some of the older generation, for instance, let's take plumbers. Plumbers that have been in the industry forever. Now we're going to a smarter way of building automation. Plumbers are not necessarily adapting to Internet of Things inside an HVAC system or solar area, whatever it is. And so what happens is, we have a younger generation that is a lot more prevalent. They're used to the instant gratification of using their phones to control everything. The older generation are not necessarily getting the necessary skill sets to stay abreast with, stay with these technologies. But I do think, actually, I just was reading an article on the Harvard Business Review about how older generation can actually use AI to help them supplement their knowledge in AI itself. So the idea is to, just like what Dr. Wilson was saying, was you can actually use a lot of information to enhance your knowledge of what's happening and use it every day. You start out small, maybe you're using Chat GPT right now. You want to do a little research, start small, but I think probably the best, what's keeping me up at night is that there's going to be a lot more climate workers displaced because of technology, because of the smarter technologies are going to be being implemented in green infrastructure in general.
Excellent. All right, Prasanna, close us out.
Sure. So, I mean, there are a lot of things about AI that keep me up at night, but I'll stick to hiring, right? Like, what about hiring, AI and hiring, that sort of is the most pressing problem? So this is something that I already talked about a few minutes ago, is essentially these platforms that have huge market power on how to allocate labor to different jobs, right? So, like LinkedIn is an example, algorithmic monoculture, another example. Where the algorithm that's doing the matching, the algorithm that's deciding who should get a call back, who should get an interview, that affects people at scale, right? So before AI, firms are, biased in some ways. At least they were biased in their own idiosyncratic way. They're not biased the exact same way. But you have these algorithms that are operating at scale, and all of a sudden you have biases that are sort of exactly the same, that affects people in very similar manner. And that has huge implications, right? In what type of people get these, requests from LinkedIn recruiters, what type of people get a call back from these firms. So that's an area where it's a very challenging problem, right? How do we fix this? Regulation seems to be one idea, but obviously regulation has all its drawbacks, stifles innovation, so on and so forth. So that's something that we haven't yet figured out as society. How do we fix something like that? But at the end of the day, I'm a optimist when it comes to technology. I think AI has tremendous opportunities when it comes to actually improving the hiring processes, right? I think we're in a regime where we're seeing AI and hiring as sort of an automation tool, right? Like, I'm trying to replace humans with AI to essentially get rid of the human, to increase my productivity, so on and so forth. But it is possible for AI to exceed sort of human performance, right? So you can think about, the way that I see AI being used, 5 to 6 years from now, is not to replace a human necessarily, but it's because it's better than the human, right? So identifying candidates, hey, this is a candidate that you've hired in the past that does exceptionally well, but has been sort of, not been considered in the past. This is a person that you should interview, right? So this is a case where it sort of exceeds sort of, human performance when it comes to who to select to interview, so on and so forth. So hopefully we're, I think in a few years we'll move away from this mindset of using AI to automate, to move towards something that says, hey, you're using AI not because it's cheaper, you're using AI because it's better than humans.
Yeah, I love all the answers. I think the thing that keeps me up at night is bad actors using a powerful technology for their own personal gain, or people with good intentions building technology but not understanding the repercussions and the butterfly effect of that technology, and not doing their due diligence in that space that leads to ramifications that we don't even know about. And so those are both, areas of issue and concern. But I think overall, to everybody's point, there's a lot more good to be done here than bad. And I think it's important that people learn how this impacts themselves and their work, and figures out how they can leverage it to be more productive, to move into the new roles of tomorrow, to enhance their companies. So honestly, this is a topic, AI hiring, I could talk about all day. I might actually text some of you late night to get some more insights, but that won't be here on the webinar. So we're going to wrap up today's discussion. I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us. I look forward to continuing the dialogue with you. I know as a year goes by and 18 months goes by, and maybe even shorter than that, there's going to be lots of changes and developments that we can talk about. I hope to revisit these topics with all of you very soon. Again, to our audience, we know AI evolving rapidly. Hopefully the dialogue here makes you better off. And we're hoping that for employers, job seekers, and society as a whole, that we can work within this technology for the betterment of everybody. While AI can be a powerful tool in the hiring process, I believe, and I think everyone else here believes, that the human element remains irreplaceable. hiring is an intimate thing. It's a complex thing. It's a nuanced thing, and AI can help us be better at it, but I don't think it can replace it. I appreciate everybody joining. Stay curious, stay informed. I hope everybody has a great, great day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.